Hi guys, welcome to Flash Fact. Today we're going to take a look at white mods. I did a video not too long ago about the color mods, and now let's take a look at the white mods. So if you're looking at your gear, you will see that in some of your gear you will see what is known as white sockets. Like you see the weapon socket that is white, you see the neck socket that is white, you see the back socket that is white, the chest socket, the boot socket or the feet socket I should say, and the hand sockets. These are the only sockets that you have in your gear. We thought at some point that they would have a socket to the helmet and the shoulders and the pants at some point because you're going to see. Essentially, if you look into your mainframe, all the way down, you'll see the tactical mods. Currently, there's only three different three different degrees. There's tactical mods 1, tactical mods 2, and there's the boosts. Once you purchase tactical mods 1, I think it's 25 marks of victory. Just check to be sure. It's been a while since I purchased it, so I don't recall exactly what the price is, but I'm pretty sure it's 25 marks of victory. So once you purchase the tactical mods 1, you'll see that it says that you can put a mod in your weapon. So once you purchase the tactical mods 1, it's purchased forever. You don't ever have to purchase it ever again. The same with tactical mods 2. Once you purchase it, it's yours forever. The tactical mods 2 allows you to put a mod in your neck piece. So essentially, tactical mods 1 allows you to put a mod in your weapon. And usually, if you only have tactical mods 1, you're going to have like a blast adapter 1. If you put then the mods in the neck piece, you're going to need the tactical mods 2, and the neck piece will be like fortified blocking 2. And if you purchase the second mod, the tactical mod 2, your weapon will also be blast adapter 2. And then for the third one, you have to pay. You can see all all the boosts essentially are 7 marks of victory. So once you pay for the boost gives you the chest, the boots, the gloves, and I'm forgetting one, the back piece. So once you purchase the boost, then you're going to be able to put mods into your chest, into your back, into your boots, and into your gloves. In the past, there was actually four slots. Like you had tactical mods 1, tactical mods 2, boost 1, boost 2, and I'm pretty sure they added even a boost to 3 at some point. And at some point, we thought that they would maybe add the mods to the pants or to the helmet. But what they ended up doing instead is that at some point the top mods you had were like mods 4, sorry. And instead of adding new mods, let's say to the helmet and the shoulders, instead they gave us mods 5. I guess it saved them a lot of work because essentially they would have needed to add white mods to every single helmet in the game. So I guess I can see how just adding a Type 5 mod instead, I probably did save them a lot of work. So essentially, once you've purchased your tactical mods and your boosts, you're not quite ready yet to put your mods. You have to go then all the way up over here into your dispenser, and here you're going to find the mods that you need. So there's about 4 or 5 mods per slots. So for the weapon, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see there's four mods for the weapons. There's the absorption adapter, which will essentially absorb damage. Probably useful if you're playing a tank. There's the blast adapter if you're playing a DPS, although the blast adapter is pretty much what I take by default with most of my characters. There's the restorative adapter, which essentially is pretty good for the healers. It will heal you and 3 other group members once in a while, once every 60 seconds, more or less. And there's the replenish adapter, which is pretty much for controllers that will restore some additional power. Then you have the mods for usually by default, I'll go for the blast adapter. But if I play a healer, once in a while, I'll go for the restorative adapter, or for the controller, once in a while, I'll go for the replenishing adapter. But more often than not, I'll go for the blast adapter. For the neck piece, I pretty much always go for the fortified blocking by default because essentially when you block, it prevents up to 80% of the incoming damage. Sadly, it's not 80% because sometimes you'll get some damage and a lot of damage goes through. So I'm not sure if it's a random number or if it's depending on the level of the enemies, or sometimes it seems to do a good job at blocking a lot of damage, but sometimes a lot of damage goes through anyway. And in end game missions, one shot will still one shot you, even if you have the fortified blocking mod and you block, you will die. Unless maybe a tank, the 45 blocking mod probably could allow a tank to survive a certain one-shot attacks. But if you're a healer or a controller, uh, you're still going to die. I remember when I first played, I think it was Paradox Wave, and had at the time 45 blocking 4 was the top mod, I think. And people were telling me that I was pretty much wasting my time wearing that since the one shots goes through the mod anyway. But it's still very useful when you're by yourself and when and in other circumstances. So it's still helpful, but don't expect it to save you from one shots unless you're a tank. Not going to happen. There's the escalating replenishing proc. As you can see, this is for controllers. Essentially, whenever you'll use an ability like defibrillator, recharge, psychic empowerment, etc., you will have 3%, 3 extra percent chances of a power critical. The focused restoration essentially increased the restoration by 8%. That's pretty good for the healer. Although some tanks, nah, not, nah, I was about to say some tanks could maybe benefit from that, but not really, since once you get hit, that effect is gone. So for a healer, if the tank does a good job to keep the aggro on him, if you're the healer and you have that mod, well, you're gonna have 8% extra restoration, which means your heal will be more or less 8% stronger. And here you have escalating might. Essentially, whenever you hit an enemy with a superpower, your might will go up by 3%, which is okay, I suppose. I guess I could replace 45 blocking with that, since with the advanced mechanic, it would kind of help. Here it's relentless precision. Essentially, what you have to do is, yeah, you have to. You may have noticed when you attack enemies, there's a hit counter that appears whenever you hit them. If you raise the counter up to 9 and more, you'll get 8% extra precision. So that was for the neck piece. For the back piece, you have the Berserker mod, you have the Breakout Protection mod, the Breakout Regeneration mod, and the Weakening Field mod, and the Violent Breakout mod. Essentially, the Berserker, you'll do extra damage when your health is below 35%. So you'll do 30% extra damage if your health is below 35%. I'm not too crazy about that because that means trying to keep your health low on purpose for some reason. And you don't really want to do that. Already, there's plenty of one-shots in the game. If you keep your health at like 30%, odds are you could easily get one-shot even by an enemy that normally you wouldn't be able to one-shot you. But I guess it can be useful in certain situations. There's a breakout protection, which is pretty much what I use by default. Essentially, when you break out, your defense and toughness is increased by 10% for about 4 seconds. It gives a bit of extra survivability to your character. There's a breakout regeneration, where essentially when you break out, you'll regenerate some health for about 4 seconds. I, I've tried it quite a few times, and it never really seems to work. If it works, it gives useful health that I didn't notice, but for a long time it didn't seem to work at all. So I pretty much gave up on using that. There's the Weakening Field, which was good in PvP at some point. Not sure if it works. It mentions enemy players. I guess in the open world it could be useful somewhat, but pretty much a useless mod in my book nowadays. There's the Valiant Breakout. That was very, very useful in PvP, especially when you had to capture nodes. Essentially, you would capture the node, enemies would attack you, you would do a Violent Breakout, and you would essentially eject them from the node, and it would help you capture the node. So that was my favorite mod until we no longer could use mods in PvP. There's the Tumbling Master, which is a fun mod to use. I'm using it with one or two characters, but it's not really my favorite. I'll go for Breakout Protection. Oh, and the Tumbling Master is for the feet. So for the gloves, the for the back, I mean these were the ones: the Berserk, Breakout Protection, Breakout Regeneration, Weakening Field, and Violent Breakout. For the feet, a lot of those are linked with the movement mode, which I'm not too crazy about, but the Tumbling Master is okay. It's a fun mod to use. The Empowered Glide, I have no idea why someone would use that, but maybe there's some use I don't see. The Deadly Block is pretty much what I use by default, 95.5% of the time. There's the explosive block, which also was very useful at some point in PvP. Again, to capture nodes. When you would block and your enemy would hit you, it would throw him away, and essentially would throw him away from the node, and the enemy would be helpless for a bit. So it would give sometimes buy you a few extra seconds to try and capture a node, which was all kinds of awesome. Sadly, again, we can't really use it anymore in PvP, so I wouldn't recommend using that. There's the swooping combo for a flying character. Essentially, it gives you an attack combo when you perform a swoop attack. I'm not sure, not a very useful ability. I wouldn't use that because the swoop attack I pretty much stopped using it because very too often as you try to go quickly towards the ground, more often than not you would end up sometimes breaking healing barrels by accident, or you're breaking things around you by accident. So I pretty much stopped using that. So, and by default the mod also becomes useless. Accelerating dive bomb, again, not too sure who would use that, but anyway. There's a dashing combo, which is well, it's a fun attack that you can do with a speedster, but there's so many other things I would use instead of that. Again, I'd prefer to use explosive block than dashing combo. Now, this one I would have to try it at some point. I'm not sure. It sounds like it could be useful, but I guess I'm gonna have to try it out on my Flash character at some point to be sure. But essentially, by default, I'd go with Deadly Block. There we go. So essentially, by default, I would go with Deadly Block. So for the chest, there's a few for the chest. There's Penetrating Strikes, there's Core Strength, there's a Quick Healing, there's Reserve Tank, and there's Extended Supercharge, and there's Enhanced Recovery. Essentially, the debate is always which is better, Penetrating Strikes or Core Strength. At some point, the math suggested that Penetrating Strikes was better, but pretty much since Game Update 47, usually Core Strength is actually the better option. There's a few exceptions to that, but we'll stick to we'll try to keep it simple today. Maybe someday I'll make a Penetrating Strikes versus Core Strength video, because that would deserve a video on its own. But essentially, by default, the core strength is pretty much the better option. There's a few exceptions, but they're just that, the exception. There's quick healing that gains an additional 10% bonus to whatever healing you receive, so that could be useful in certain groups. There's the reserve tank, which essentially gives you 25% extra power to your power bar. Again, that could be useful in certain situations. Although if you have a good control in the group, the mod is pretty much pointless. The same with quick healing. But nowadays, a lot of controllers and even healers aren't that great, so I can see the use for those mods once in a while. The extended supercharge essentially increases your supercharge bar. So you're going to be able to cast your supercharge a little bit more once your supercharge is full. And there's the enhanced recovery. Essentially, as you fight enemies, it will drop some sort of blue baubles that will restore powers. Never really tried that, so I have no idea how it actually works and if it's even useful. Um, I always play as a controller, so essentially I regenerate my own power and the power to the group. So I never really bothered to try that mod. So usually, by default, core strength is pretty much the better option, unless for some reason you need one of the other for whatever reason. As a DPS, I would go for core strength. And then there's the hand mod. There's the regenerative shielding. There's max damage. There's empowered channeling. There's improved stealth, and there's mighty smashing. So regenerative shielding. Oh, I can't even show it to you. Yeah, I can't really. Essentially, when you cast a personal shield like this, it will give you a bit of healing. It's not much, but when you use your shield fairly often, it adds up in a fight, and it gives extra survivability to your character. And also, the more you cast it, the more you will heal yourself. And again, it isn't all that much, but in the long run, it's really useful. There's the max damage mod, which essentially, if you're a DPS, every time you use a power, you will do 60% extra damage. The max damage mod is pretty much the mod that every DPS should use. And depending on the role, certain roles can use it also. Like, for example, the regenerative shielding, pointless for a character that uses Gadget, because Gadget has no shield, no personal shield. So if you're playing, let's say, Gadget, you may as well go with max damage. It's a much better option. There's the empowered channeling mod, which essentially means that certain ability that normally would be interrupted, like let's say the Green Lantern powers is like a great example, like the minigun or the light blast, or it has a lot of abilities that can be pretty much interrupted very easily. But when you use the empowered channeling mod, those abilities cannot be interrupted. So that's pretty much that's very useful for that. Also, will give you a little boost to your defense and toughness. So that's nothing to sneeze at. Also, there's the improved stealth, which not really that useful. It's the kind of mod that you pretty much give to a character that you use when you play solo, and if you want to do a bit of role play. Like I think I gave that to my Wolverine character and maybe one or two other characters that are stealth-like characters, but not the most useful ability, I suppose. And there's the Mighty Smash, which essentially gives weaponization rating equal to 25% might and an additional 5% critical hit chance while smashing with a weaponized object. Essentially, what that means is that when sometimes you'll notice you can grab a barrel or a rock or a car and throw it at an enemy. Uh, that means that the mighty smash means that if you use if you throw your car at an enemy, you will do 25% extra damage thanks to the mighty smash. Actually, you will get 25%. You will do 25% in damage of your might to an enemy. Like if you have 100 might, you will do 25 damage to the enemy. Usually, you have a lot more might than that. Let's take a look. Like right now, our friend Magneto has like 5,709 might. So 25% of that would be done in damage to an enemy if I throw him a car or something like that. And usually that will add up also to certain powers. Like there's already also the super strength power, which gives you 10% weaponization rating. I'm not sure though if I'm not sure if if the 10% adds up to the 25%. If it does, that would mean 35%. but I'm pretty sure it's probably the higher of the two that you get. And also, yeah, there's certain powers that sometimes will work also with weaponization. Like for example, telekinesis. It doesn't say how much, but essentially when you cast, I don't really have anything to show an example, but when you cast the telekinesis, I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes you'll see that it grabs a car and throws the car at an enemy. Well, if I have weaponization thanks to my super strength, and if I had, let's say, the weaponization mod, odds are that car would do extra damage. Again, I never really tested it, so I wouldn't say 100% for sure, but from the sounds of it, that seems to be what it actually does. So once you have your white mods, let's take a few just as an example. So let's grab, let's say, the blast adapter, your fortified blocking, and the breakout protection. That'll be good enough. So it's pretty simple. You see, essentially, this is what the mods look like. You'll see like the mods type 5 have a Roman numeral 5. The others will have like a Roman numeral 3 because that's the max they can give you anyway. So the breakout protection would go into the back piece. So let's go into the back piece. You put your mod there, and there we go. The same with the weapon. And the same with the neck piece. Since I already had a mod and since also it's part of an armory, you saw there was a few messages asking me if I really wanted to put the mod there, and I really wanted to. So as you can see, the mods I'll go for by default. For if I'm a controller and I'm using shields, I'll go for regenerative shielding. Uh, I'll go usually with pretty much 90% of my characters. I'll go for a deadly block for the feet. For the chest, as I mentioned, core strength. The math suggests that core strength is the option to use right now. Again, there's exceptions to that, but that's what they are, exceptions. For the back, I'll go for breakout protection. So essentially, whenever I block, whenever I break out, my defense is increased by 10% for about 4 seconds, which doesn't seem like much, but it does give a bit of extra survivability to your character when needed. And here we have the fortified blocking, which essentially may prevent up to 80% damage. Again, it doesn't prevent 80% damage. It may prevent up to that. So I'm not sure exactly how the math is calculated for that. Is there a random effect that means that sometimes you'll block 20%, sometimes you'll block 60%, sometimes you'll block 80? I have no idea. But essentially, to keep it simple, it prevents some damage when you block. Already when you block, you do prevent some damage. When you block with that mod, you prevent even more. And for the weapon, again, essentially the blast adapter, what it does is that it does damage, extra damage to the target you're targeting, and it could do damage to 5 other nearby enemies. So essentially, you could damage 6 enemies at once and do additional damage at that. And for DPS, again, I strongly suggest that you use the max damage mod. And usually, what I'll suggest also is that have an extra pair of gloves because you cannot put more than one mod in your gear. So as you can see, essentially, I have a pair of gloves for my controller and I have a pair of gloves for my DPS, so that I can have both mod. And what that does essentially is that whenever I'll use a superpower, thanks to that mod, I'll do 60% extra damage. So essentially, whenever I use, let's use a power. Whenever I use a power, if you look at the top left of the screen, you see underneath my name and underneath all my stats, you'll see a little green starburst. Essentially, whenever that little starburst appears, it means that my character does 60% extra damage. So, and that happens whenever I use a power. So use a power, 60% extra damage. Use a power, 60% extra damage. Use a power, 60% extra damage. And also what I meant, there was this mod. Let's go back. Which one was it? I think it was this one. This one. I'll take both just to be sure. So essentially, there's a escalating might 5. It means that increase your might by 3% for 8 seconds each time you hit an enemy with an arm foil superpower. And it can stack up to 3 times. So it could go up to 9% if you can. Doesn't it work for supercharges though? It doesn't really matter. Especially with this character, I'm not using supercharges. As you may have noticed, essentially there's no supercharge in my loadout with our evil Magneto. So what that means is that whenever I would cast this power, I would get 3%, 3%, 3%, and 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%, and 3%. So it should increase my might. Not sure if we can look 64, 61. Let's wait a few seconds. Oh, we didn't hit enemies, obviously, so it doesn't work. Let's go try it with a combat dummy. What's the point of having multiple bases if we don't use them? So normally if I hit an enemy, I'm not sure if the combat dummy will count for that, but let's try it out. So whenever a harmful superpower hits an enemy, I should gain 3% extra damage up to 9%. So normally I should be having 9% extra, not extra damage, but extra might. So I should be having 9% extra might right now. So let's try and take a look quickly. I have 69, 63. So you can see my, oh no, that's power. 66, okay. I had 66 something. Let's try it again. So I don't know if you've noticed the value. Let's try it a few times again, just to be sure. I'm not sure why it doesn't seem to work all the time. So we have 70, 42 might, 68, 66, 64. So you see the might, our might increases whenever we use a superpower on an enemy. So whenever I hit that little fella with a power, my might goes up, and it can go up to by 9%. So I probably should consider using that instead of the fortified blocking. I guess I'm gonna have to try it out and see if it actually works. And essentially, so with our mod, our max damage mod, which give us 60% extra damage, and with our neck mod, which give us essentially 9% extra might, though both those give us a bit of extra damage. And of course, there's also the blast adapter, which also gives us a little extra damage. So these aren't much, and especially like the mod gives maybe 9% extra might, which isn't all that much, but every little bit helps. But again, if you don't have it, it doesn't really matter. You can do fine. You may have noticed very often I'll forget to pay the rent for my mainframe, and very often my mods aren't working. Like you sometimes you'll see like deadly block, let's say in red, or max damage in red, or core strength in red, because I didn't pay the rent for my mainframe, and you barely notice the difference when you're playing missions. It does help, but it's not a deal breaker if somehow you forgot to pay your rent or something like that. So that's pretty much it for the white mods, I think. Let's take a quick look just to be sure. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's it. So essentially, you have to go all the way down. You have to purchase the Tactical Mods 1, Tactical Mods 2, and then you have to purchase the boost. The boost is good for 60 days. Once you pay for your 7 marks of victory for the boost will last 60 days. So after 60 days, you're going to have to pay 7 marks of victory again. So I have a lot of characters that I never bother paying the boost because I don't play them often enough. And as I mentioned, you don't really need the boost. But of course, if I have some extra marks on a character, then sure, I'll purchase the mods. But it's not absolutely necessary. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So that was Slash Facts for today. So thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.